Okay, so it's Parshas Emor, and we have the parsha is called Parshas Emor because it means say. By Yomer Hashem on Moshe, Hashem said to Moshe, Emor ela kohanim b'nei Aaron v'amarta aleim lenefesh leitam b'amav. Say to the sons of Aaron, the sons of Aaron, the Kohanim, that lenefesh leitam b'amav. They shall not come in contact. They should not become impure through a person who has passed away. There's a dead person, right? There's a mitzvah in the Torah that a Kohen, if you are a Kohen, you have a special kedusha. There's an intrinsic holiness that precludes you from being in contact with someone who passed away, and that includes being in a building with a corpse with a mace. The tuma and the laws are complex, but the tuma passes through, and the impurity in the house and in the building, and therefore, a kohen is not allowed to be in proximity in a cemetery, in a building with a mace. A hospital is could be problematic for a Kohen.
What about in battle? Like we got the war now going on, so a Kohen having to go into a building where there's a dead quote unquote Palestinian in big quotes. What happens?
They have to go to the mikvah.
They go. Well, life and death situation is obviously different. If you're serving in the army, so then. Just like they don't on Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos are pushed away. If you're in the army, it's a life and death situation. So for a Kohen as well, the laws would be pushed off as well. The impurity of a mace of someone who's not Jewish might be a rabbinic prohibition. Might not be the same level as a Jewish person. A Kohen is careful with all, whether it's a Jewish person that passed away or non-Jewish nowadays, no question about it. But it could be that there are certain leniencies regarding, a non-Jewish mace, a person who passed away. But the simple answer is that, if you're in battle, a person's life takes precedence, and we violate or we push away. It's pushed away, or it might even be that it's not even a sin for its hutra. It's like permitted. Just like the Shabbos, life or death situations, the Shabbos is pushed away. So it would be the same thing as well. And I'm sure there are soldiers that are Kohanim in Gaza. I'm sure there's soldiers that are Kohanim in Gaza, and they, I don't know. I mean, how close are they to I guess if they're in the same building, but how close are they to the? But it could, I don't remember offhand. It could be a non-Jewish. I believe that we still are careful with it, though. But I don't know how close they are to someone who's passed away.
Sometimes they're going through tunnels, and they're right.
So that's a life and death situation.
Yeah.
So that certainly would be permissible. That would be
certainly
permissible.
Visit a relative in the cemetery?
So that's an excellent question. So
they're buried against the fence.
Let's read
they
further.
On the outside.
That's very right. So let's continue a little bit.
I'm sorry.
So here you go. No. It's good. It's a nice segue into the very next verse. Ki im l'she'ero hakarev elo, except for his relative who was closest to him, which are considered the 7 closest relatives, which the verse enumerates, which is his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, his brother, a sister who's not married, right, and his wife. And a person's wife as well. So those 7.
Why what difference does it make if the sister is married or not? Why is she still the close relative, one way or the other?
Right. That's an excellent question. Right. That's a good question. It's a very good question. I want to keep the question. I like the question. Why is it why is it that a woman, once she's married, So her status really changes once she's married. Let's say a woman who is her father's a Kohen. So right, we know lineage, Jewishness goes through the mother. If the mother is Jewish, then the person is Jewish. Lineage, yichus, lineage goes after the father. But a Jewish woman, when she gets married, her lineage goes according to her husband. So that her children go after her, and the lineage goes after her husband. So if she was the daughter of a Kohen, so she was able to eat truma, she was able to eat the tithes that are set aside for a Kohen. But once she gets married, let's say she marries a Levite, or she marries an Israelite, a Yisrael, or a Levi, so then she no longer can partake in it. So her status, her lineage and status changes. It could also be this idea that once she's married, she's really, she's involved with her family. But a son, a brother, though, also is a similar thing. So it's a good question. Let's leave it alone. I'm sure the commentaries, I don't know offhand. The commentaries, I'm sure, explain it. It's open. First, Rashi doesn't really get into it. He just gets into the technicalities. That once she's had relations, once she's been married, basically, so then she is, she no longer is.
She's safe.
Right. We know that if she was just engaged, so then he does go to the I don't want to say he doesn't go to the funeral, but it just means he can't be in close proximity of the mace. He could go to the funeral as long as he waits in an area. And nowadays in Jewish funeral homes, they do have areas for the Kohen either outside with speakers and other things. This is talking about going within four amos, which is about 6 feet within the mace, or going inside a building with the mace. So basically, the answer to the question, a Kohen, when one of his close relatives pass away, they do go to the funeral. They are impure. They become impure from coming close proximity to the mace through the body that passed away, the person that passed away. But like Mr. Goldberg said, they do it. They're only there as little as possible. As soon as the funeral is over, they have an obligation to leave the cemetery. And most Jewish cemeteries, there's a special area for Kohanim, right? I don't know how many people know this, but this is true. This is a thing. There's a special area for Kohanim, which is usually at the entrance of the cemetery, in order that they shouldn't be impure more than they need to. So if it's all the way in the back, so then every gravestone they pass by is an impurity for them. So they so we mitigate it as much as possible. So I don't know if that answered your question, but a funeral of a close friend or acquaintance, the Kohen does go, but they wait in an area. There's an area, most places, for Kohanim, designated for Kohanim.
When I used to go visit, when I was years ago, we went in to see, the Rebbe's Ohel, and so there were Kohanim that went in, and me and a group of Bachorim would surround them, join hands.
Wow.
So that was what was considered okay to join, to make like a circle around them.
Wow, fascinating. Very interesting. I'm not familiar, but I'm not a Kohen, and it could be. I hear it's there's maybe certain areas around. There is a minority of opinions that might hold going to a righteous person may be different, but the consensus of the halachic authorities is that a Kohen does not, even a righteous person generally, maybe in that case, maybe there were I don't know exactly the details. I hear what you're saying, but what's the reason for this? The reason for this is that a Kohen has a level of sanctity, a high level of sanctity, and he has a higher level of sanctity than a Levite or Israelite. A Levite has a higher level of sanctity, of kedusha, of holiness, than a regular Yisrael. And of course, a Yisrael, every Jew has tremendous holiness, no question about it. And every human being is created in the image of God and is very precious. But the Kohen has this intrinsic holiness because he's from the sons of Aaron, because he's been set aside to do the service in the temple of God. So he's on a different level, and it is incongruous to have him around death. Why? Because death represents the opposite of the service that the Kohen did. The service that the Kohen did in the Beis Hamikdash represents, in the temple, it represents the quintessential service of God. And every mitzvah we do, and the service of God that we do, is nitzchias. It is forever. Every mitzvah we do is it's something that is there for a person forever. It's the only thing that we take with us when we leave this world. The good deeds that we do, the mitzvahs and the good deeds that we do, and what we work on ourselves. So the Kohen represents eternity. So death seemingly is a paradox. It's to kedusha, to holiness, to eternity, the eternalness of the soul. We have to remember the soul does not die. The soul, the Talmud tells us in Tractate Nida that the three partners to every human being, there's Father, the Mother, and God. And the Talmud enumerates that basically, in a nutshell, the Father and Mother give the physical components of the child, of the person, and God gives the spiritual. And included in the spiritual is the soul, the ability to hear, to talk, to see, to speak, right? All these things.
Question. I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. No, of course.
If the Kohanim are holier than any of the other, I don't want to use the word sect, but any of the other groups of Jews, is there a special place in heaven for their souls so they're not contaminated with the rest of us? And that's not a joke.
No. Well, the soul doesn't get contaminated. It's only in this world. It's only in this world that there's contamination. The soul. I mean, there is a place of there's Gehenna. There's there's a place for the souls to get cleansed. Purgatory. There is such a concept, but purity, impurity is of this world, and it has to do with that and I think we spoke about this in Parshas Tazria, which speaks about when a woman gives birth and she's impure for a certain amount of days. But basically, the Tuma, impurity, comes when potential is lost. When the potential is lost, when the potential is gone, it creates an impurity. In the case of death. So death, when a person was alive, it was a vibrant soul in a body. It was the ability to come close to God. And so when you have that separation, when God says after an allotted time that the neshama goes back and his soul is removed from the body, so God says, you take what yours, I take mine. So we're left with the body to deal with. That's what the father and mother gave. And Hashem takes the neshama, God takes the soul. So therefore, a person's ability to speak, to see, to the soul being part of being part of in this world, once that's removed, so that creates, it's not a vacuum, it creates an impurity in its place. So a Kohen who represents the service of God, he's the quintessential service of God in the temple. So it doesn't fit with what he represents. He represents this idea that service of Hashem and the mitzvahs that we do are eternal. They're forever. There is no death with it. So death is it's a stira. It is a contradiction to what the Kohen represents, and therefore, because of his level because of his kedusha, what he represents, holiness. So he's removed from that impurity. And like I said, this has applications today. It's pretty difficult for a Kohen to be a doctor without getting involved in specifics, but generally, because if you are a doctor, there's no question you're going to be around cadavers. You're going to be around to study medicine. You need to be around these things, and a Kohen has a problem with that. So usually a Kohen is not a doctor. There are responses, tshuvas, the rabbis that wrote on it, but that's the idea. Okay, except for the relatives, and there's one other exception we know, of course, right? Right. Let's continue. A husband among his people, so make it so. Right. Right. So a woman who he's not supposed to marry, he doesn't become impure for her. Right, a woman who was divorced, or if she herself was a halala, she was a product of a marriage that was not meant to, that a Kohen wasn't supposed to marry that lady. Right? Okay, and we know, of course, also mace mitzvah. There's a mace mitzvah, which is if there is in a case where someone passed away and no one is involved with the burial, so there even a Kohen Gadol, becomes impure. Certainly, a regular Kohen becomes impure dealing with what's called a mace mitzvah, a person who passed away and no one's dealing with him. So then, of course, we deal with them, and the derech eretz, the right to take care of another human being, right? It's also part of this idea that once a person passes away, the body has holiness, the body has kedusha. The body was a vehicle that served God in this world. The body was a vessel for the soul in this world in order to come close to God and elevate. So the body is treated with a tremendous kedusha, tremendous holiness, and that's why the Jewish burial and the customs with Jewish burial is so intricate and involved, and we take it very seriously, of course, because it is because it was a soul that was part of it, and it was a vehicle that was used. The physical body was a vehicle that was used for the soul to do mitzvahs in this world. Okay, let's continue. And here it continues: you shall not make a bald spot on their heads. They shall not shave the edge of their beard and their flesh. Shall not make a scratch. And this is talking about for someone who passed away. You're not allowed to, right? They cannot make balds. You cannot, right? It says Rashi, verse number 5, al mace, as a sign of mourning over a dead person. And Rashi explains, really, Israelites are also prohibited from doing this, right? In Deuteronomy, they're prohibited from making a bald spot, but in Parshas Re'eh, the Torah says, we are children of God. Don't make a bald spot for a mace, like to go to do, right? And Rashi says, no, both verses, this verse and the verse over there, is needed, and not to tear away any part, tear here or make scratches, or make cuts. You're not allowed to make cuts or scratches for a day. You're not allowed to overly mourn for a departed person. And Rashi says over here, continues, Ki es ishe Hashem. So the Torah gives a reason. Kedoshim you, verse number 6, they shall be holy, le'elokehem, to their God. V'lo yechalu Hashem elokehem, they shall not desecrate the name of their God. Ki es ishe Hashem, for the fire offerings of Hashem, lechem elokehem, the food of their God, he makrivim, they offer v'hayu kodesh, so they shall remain holy. And Rashi says, right, so meaning they do the service in the Beis Hamikdash, they are the representatives of the Jewish people for the service in the temple. They represent spirituality, and again, spirituality is the opposite of death. And death is really a marat when it comes to the spiritual, to the neshama. There is really no concept of death, because the soul of the departed is just as alive as before. The whole idea of Shiva, of sitting Shiva, is not just for us, it's for the soul. The soul is around the house when a person's sitting Shiva. When a person eulogizes the person that passed away, the soul is there. The soul is just as alive as when it was in the body. The only difference is that it doesn't have a vehicle. It doesn't have a vehicle to go. What?
I thought that after the funeral, the soul ascends. You're saying the soul will remain?
There is in Kabbalah, the soul, there's parts to the soul, there are levels of the soul, and parts of it remain until the body goes completely back into the ground. There seems to be the Gemara, the Talmud seems to speak about this idea that all the while that it's a process really for the soul and the body. So when the body returns to the ground and it changes, so that's part of the process of the soul eventually going up and completely going up in heaven. But it's part of that process.
Why we sit?
Yeah.
Isn't it why we sit with the body? Because when the person first dies, soul is wandering around, so we sit and we say psalms until the time of burial, and at that point The soul has to make a decision, I guess.
Right. There is a concept that there's a mace. A person who passed away needs a shomer, needs a guard to watch over it, because there are different forces in the world that God created, and by saying Psalms to him, you create a barrier, a shmira, a protection over the body, and the soul is but the soul is very much there, no question about it. The soul is there, and the soul hears is by the eulogies, and is by the funeral, and it just can no longer partake in this world. But it's a process, really. When the soul leaves this world, it's a process. That's So the Kohen represents the soul. That's why he's that's the idea. That's what he's removed from it. Okay, Kedoshim you, they shall be holy. Rashi says, I'll cut them against their will. Akdishim Bezdin shall sanctify. And this obviously he's talking about in the times of the temple, that Bezdin would, a person can't relinquish their holiness. It's a silly thing to do, right? Because it's a tremendous merit that they have, that the Kohen has, but it's not something that they've chosen for whatever reason. God chose their soul, that their soul should be a Kohen. Okay, and then continuing on, it speaks about they shall not marry a woman who is a zona or a halala, shall not marry a woman who has been divorced by her husband, for each one is holy. Right? And Rashi says a woman had relations to a Jew who is forbidden to her, right to mamzer, other things, so she can that prevents her from marrying a Kohen, or a halala, a woman who was born from unions unfit for kahuna. For example, the daughter of a widow of a Kohen Gadol. A regular Kohen can marry a widow. A regular Kohen can't marry a divorcee, but he can marry a widow. A Kohen Gadol can't even marry a widow. Right? Or Bas Grusha, Kohen Hedjid, or the daughter of a divorced woman from an ordinary Kohen, right, from a divorce. So that child can't marry a Kohen as well. Now Rashi is and now verse 8, very fascinating. The Kidashto, you shall sanctify the Kohen. So Rashi says, what does this mean? Nohog bo kedusha, treat him with holiness. Liftoach rishon b'chol davar, that he should take priority to commence in all matters. Ulevarach rishon, to bless first, to take priority to bless the besuda at the meal. Meaning there's a mitzvah to sanctify the Kohen and to give the Kohen first. So if a person's sitting at a table, you should give the Kohen for first dibs in the food, or that's sanctifying the Kohen. You're according him honor, and that's the idea of that we have in this week's Parsha. Well, and again, it's this idea that the Kohen, the level of the Kohen, the sanctity of the Kohen, that God shows him, and it's this idea that everyone has a mission in this world. Everyone has a mission in this world. The Kohen has his mission, and it comes with tremendous responsibilities. Part of that responsibilities is who he can marry, is more restrictions, because he has this tremendous undertaking of holiness and service in the temple. And that comes with not be defiling, not having Tomas Mesa, right? Coming into contact with a person who's passed away. An Israelite or a Levi has a much easier time with funerals, going to funerals. He doesn't have that sanctity. So there's always a give and take in life. And depending on what we're supposed to do in this world, that's what we have. That's whether a person's a Kohen, a Levi, Yisrael. We all make up the Jewish people. Everyone complements each other, but it's not a free for all where a person just whatever they feel like, that's what they do. No, God designates based on what our soul is supposed to do in this world. So a Kohen is a very unique task, and therefore it comes with those tremendous responsibilities. Okay, and then it speaks about the Kohen Gadol, who he doesn't go to any funerals, even for his family members. And it speaks about, right, he's supposed to really remain on the grounds of the temple, and he's very involved with the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. He's very involved with the service more than the other Kohanim, and therefore he has a very specific a very specific task as well. Okay, let's continue here. And it speaks about it speaks about blemishes of the Kohanim. The Kohanim have certain blemishes to do the service. They can do other things. They still have kedusha. They still have holiness, but doing the service in the temple require them not to be missing limbs and whatnot. And that we have in this week's parsha as well. Okay, let's skip a little bit now to the holidays. We have the holidays in this week's parsha. Skip now too. Okay. There are a lot of times for the korbanos. Okay, here we go. The fourth aliyah. Speak to the children of Israel. Say to them, Dabri al bnei Yisrael, Moedei Hashem. These are the Hashem's appointed festivals. Asher tikru osam mikrei kodesh, that which you shall designate as calling of holiness. We have to sanctify the festivals. Asher tikru osam mikrei kodesh, Elohei moedai. These are my appointed festivals. And right, it says Rashi over here, speak to the children of Israel. Asay moados, make appointed festivals, shiu Yisrael, so that Israel should be present by them in them. Malamed, it teaches us Shema Abram es Hashana, that they intercalate a month in the year. They should add a month to make a leap year of 13 months. Al Galuyos, because of exiles, Jews living in the diaspora, Shenekru and Kanu have been uprooted from their place, who have left their homes. Lalos Laregel, to ascend to Jerusalem for the festival, Adayin Lo Higia Yerushalayim, and have not yet arrived in Jerusalem. Right. So basically, right, the matter, let's see, number 2 here, the matter of fixing the calendar is the responsibility of the courts alone, not of the entire nation of Israel. That the Torah has Moshe addressed the issue of children of Israel, the entire nation, to teach that the court should fix the calendar in such a way as to allow for the maximum representation of the nation of Israel in Jerusalem at the time of the festivals by postponing them if necessary through the addition of a 13th month of the year. This is one of the reasons for which the court may intercalate a 13th month. For other reasons, see Sanhedrin 11a. And we know, of course, that we do have a leap year in order to always have Passover in the spring. Because if we just followed the lunar months and Rosh Chodesh, we do follow the lunar calendar, but we also follow, for the years, we follow a solar calendar. And because it's 11 plus off, so we have a leap year, so we make sure to guard the month of the springtime, the month of Aviv, the month of Passover. The Torah says you have to guard it, and that means you have to make sure that it is in the springtime. So now we're talking about the holidays. So very fascinating. The Torah goes right into Shabbos. Sheishes Yomim Te'aseh Malacha, for a 6-day period labor may be done. Uvayom Ashvi Shabbos Shabboson, and the 7th day is a day of complete rest. Mikra Kodesh Kol Malacha Lo Sasu, we don't do any work, not even cooking. Right? Shabbos Hila Hashem, it's a day of Shabbos for Hashem. B'chol Moshvei Seichem, in all your settled places. Right? And Rashi says there's a juxtaposition between Shabbos and the holidays, meaning that you have to have both. You can't just have Shabbos and not the holidays, or Shabbos, right? You don't desecrate either one, and if you keep both of them, it's as if you've kept the full calendar. So this is a very fascinating idea. The Torah speaks about the holidays, right? These are the holidays, right? So you'd think, right, go right into the holidays, right? Pesach, right? And the verses begin with Passover. The first topic of the holidays is the weekly Shabbos. Very fascinating. Why is that? Why is the Shabbos the introduction to the holidays? Meaning, Shabbos was discussed already throughout the book of in Sefer Shemos, in the book of Exodus. The Jewish people got the Shabbos before they received the Torah. The Shabbos is in the 10 Commandments in Parshas Yisro, right? Shabbos is when about building of the Mishkan. Vayakov V'Kude, it speaks about Shabbos as well, the building of the Mishkan. That it doesn't override Shabbos. They don't build the tabernacle on Shabbos. So, and we learn the laws of Shabbos from the building of the tabernacle. So why does the Torah bring it in here as well? But we have to understand that the whole purpose of the holidays and the festivals really is this idea of that each festival represents, it's not just like a birthday. What's a birthday? When we have a birthday, when we celebrate a birthday, right? I turned 40 this year, right? So when I celebrated my birthday, nothing really happened. What am I celebrating? I'm celebrating that 40 years ago, something happened. I was born. Is anything happening this year? No, nothing's happening this year. It's commemoration. But the holidays there's a spiritual component that each holiday brings, that if we prepare for the holiday, we could tap in and get. So Shabbos is that as well. Shabbos is the so to speak, in air quotes, the holiday that comes every single week. Why? Because Shabbos really represents, right? Just like Passover has its representation. Passover represents this idea that of divine providence, the foundations of Judaism, of emunah, of faith, and trusting in God. That's what Passover represents. Passover represents reaching high levels very quickly. That's the Seder night. The Seder night, right? It's the idea of they left Egypt b'chipazon very quickly. They left Egypt. They didn't have enough time for the dough to rise. That's why we eat matzah. One of the ideas, right? So Passover has that representation of being able to go above the boundaries that we put ourselves in or that we're in. We're able to overcome that. Our soul is able to reach above that. You know, the restrictions in this world. Sometimes we perhaps could feel it's not possible. We have to realize you're a soul. There's no such thing as not possible. There's no such thing. A soul is eternal. A soul cannot be measured, right? The physical body can be measured, right? But the soul is not, it's the spiritual doesn't take up space in this world. It permeates us, that gives us life, but it is not right from this world. So every single holiday, right? Shavuos is the giving of the Torah. Mount Sinai represents this eternal bond that we have with God, right? Sukkot has this representation that God protected us. It's also remembering Egypt, right? So what Shabbos? Shabbos is this idea that it's connected with the holidays. Shabbos is this idea that God is running the show. Whatever I do during the 6 days is I'm going through the motions. I have to go through the motions. I can't rely on miracles. I have to go to work. I have to take care of my family, right? Hopefully I have to have some time to pray, to learn some Torah, but right, you're going through. Shabbos that's it. Hashem is in control. It's God's world. God created the world. So it's interconnected with the holidays. So that's why very fascinating when the Torah says, these are the holidays, and then it goes right to Shabbos. Shabbos is the miniature holiday. And, you know, I was listening to a talk, and we see, you know, Judaism, we don't keep Judaism for the therapy, but it is at times therapeutic. So when a person has a day of the week where he turns off his electronic devices and he dedicates time for holiness, for spirituality, for family, right? That's a huge plus nowadays, right? The huge plus. The person's able to turn things off, remove himself from all the mishagas, the craziness in the world, right? The news, the constant barrage of just this, like, you're being rained upon, like all the terrible things that's happened. You know, the news is, you know, it's not really, you know, a person has this feeling of curiosity. You want to know what's going on, right? But on the other hand, like, to know like all the bad thing that's going on the other side of the world, like, I don't know how good it is for us psychologically, you know, to like, and the news is like enough. Like, oh my goodness, you know, there's a wildfire in Canada, you know, like, that's terrible. And maybe we could pray for them. We could dive in, and it's, you know, it's startling, and maybe that will lead a person to you know, to be more spiritual. But, you know, by and large, usually it's just like a shock, like, oh gosh, you know, like, it's so when we have a day of the week that we turn things off, that's that's a tremendous thing, and it's like a mini holiday. It's a mini holiday. Okay, let's continue over here. Fine. The first of the month and the 14th of the month toward the evening is Pesach to Hashem, right? It's Pesach la Hashem, and Rashi says Hakravas Korban, the bringing of the offering, Sheshmo Pesach, whose name is Pesach. And it's very fascinating that we call Passover, but it's really in the Torah, it's called the holiday of Matzos. And Passover really is referred to as the offering throughout the Torah. If you look carefully throughout the Torah, the holiday of Passover is not really, the 70th holiday is not really called Passover. It's called the holiday of Matzos. Passover in the Torah is referring to the offering. Rashi says it here as well, the bringing of the offering. Because if you look throughout it, if you're very careful, you start to realize, wait, 1 second, why do we even call it Passover? And that's a very good question. And the reason why, one of the main reasons why it's called Passover is this idea that we focus on what God did for us, that God jumped over the houses, and by the Makas Bechoros, by the killing of the firstborn in Egypt, we were saved. And that's the shows we show our love to God, that we remember this. And God, the Torah calls it the holiday of Matzos, because God is remembering what we did, that we left without any provisions and we followed him into the wilderness. So that's the idea. But just technically speaking, the holiday of Passover in the Torah is called the holiday of Matzos. And whenever the Torah refers to Passover, it's referring to the offering, which was brought on the eve of Passover. Right, you shall bring a fire offering to Hashem. Right, says Rashi, these are the Musaf offerings. The Musaf offering, Musaf means additions in Hebrew, and those are the extra offerings that were brought on Passover and all the holidays, which is stated in Parshas Pinchas. And right, so that's the that we have, and we have the Musaf prayer that in lieu of the temple. Now that we don't have a temple, so on every day of Passover, there's the additional standing prayer called the Musaf, because they had that offering on the holiday. You shall not do work of labor. And work of labor means like going to work, these types of things. But for cooking, right, that's permitted. That's why by Shabbos it says don't do any work, period. Over here it says meleches avoda, don't do work of labor. So Nachmanides explains over here in this week's portion that work of labor means you're allowed to do certain work, and that's for cooking, things that are for the festival that wasn't able to be done before, cooking and other things that are universal needs, like washing with hot water with your hands, face, and feet, even warming up hot water on the holiday for that, other certain universal needs, and that's permitted. That's why it's meleches avoda, you shall not do work of labor, and it doesn't say you shall not do work, period. So you can, Shabbos, it says you're not allowed to do any work.
So you can take a bath on Yontiv, but not on Shabbos?
Yes, according to some opinions, the Code of Jewish Law, technically, in the times of the Shulchan Aruch, taking a bath wasn't done as often as we do it. So he says it's permitted to wash your hands, face, and feet in hot water. But there are rabbis nowadays that say it's nowadays akin to our showering with hot water. Okay, all right, let's continue. Okay, here we have when you enter the land that I shall give you. You shall bring the Omer, right? You shall reap its harvest, shall bring the Omer offering, the first of the harvest of the Kohen. You shall wave the Omer for Hashem as an appeasement to you on the day after, right? This is the second day of Pesach, Passover. This is connected to the verses previous. And this is the Omer offering, the barley offering. And it's the first that's harvested. The Kohen waves it. Says Rashi, verse 11, Kol Tenufa, every wave he mentioned the Torah, Molech maybe means he waves it back and forth. Milo Mor, he lifts it, lowers it. Molech maybe he brings it back and forth. To restrain harmful winds. Malo Mor, he lifts and lowers it. to restrain harmful do's, meaning that there's and shaking the lulav and esrog. Rashi says a similar thing in the beginning of tractate Tainus, that the shaking of the lulav and esrog, there's deep kabbalistic things happening, that it's a shmira, protection of difficult winds and rains. So we have this by the Omer offering, and this is right. This is what is brought on this. This is the first of the harvest, which is brought on the second day of Passover. Okay, on the day that you wave the Omer, you shall perform the service of an unblemished lamb, whole offering, right? So this is the carbon Omer that was brought, and it permitted all the other grains. And then Usfartem lachem yimachas Shabbos, you shall count for yourselves the day after Shabbos, which is this Shabbos, means the day after this rest day. Which rest day? This is Passover, which means the day after the first day of Passover, we begin counting. Rashi says, Mimachas Yom Tov, the morrow of the festival of Passover. So we start counting. 7 weeks, they shall be complete. We count 7 full weeks. They shall be complete. Says Rashi, Malami, this teaches us that we begins to count from the evening following the 15th of Nisan. That's the day after the first day of Passover. Shem loy came for not so, and Utmiris, they're not complete, and we count for 7 weeks. Meaning into 7 weeks, but not including. Meaning we go till 49 days, right? And then we count, and then we bring a new meal offering to Hashem, and this is done on the holiday of Shavuos. And the commentaries explain very beautifully that this we begin by bringing the right. Rashi says over here that Mincha Chadasha, a new meal offering. This is the first meal offering that is brought from the new crop. And right from all your settled places, bread of elevation shall bring bread of elevation. Lechem tenufa shtayim, you bring the 2 breads, right, which is brought on the holiday of Shavuos, right? Bread of raising, Rashi says, which is raised up out of the rest of the crop for the sake of He is on high. It's brought as an offering. Bezuhi mincha chadasha. This is the first new meal offering, which is brought in the temple. Amar lamala. So this is done on Shavuos. And the commentaries explain we bring on the second day of Passover the barley offering, which permits the new grain. Before the second day of Passover, they would not eat the new grain. The new grain, let's say oats. Oats usually are the grain which grows the quickest. They would not eat it. And there's a question of whether outside the land of Israel nowadays is this prohibition, but certainly in the land of Israel, it's a prohibition until the second day of Passover. And barley represents food that they fed to the animals primarily. So on the second day of Passover, we bring the barley offering, and then that begins the process of the counting of Spiras HaOmer, of the counting from when the barley offering is brought, and that's 7 weeks. And then we have the holiday of Shavuos, the holiday of the weeks, the holiday of which commemorates the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai. So the original Passover, the Jewish people had 50 days later. They counted 49 days to prepare for the 50th day. 50 days later, they got the Torah on Mount Sinai. So we start off with the barley offering on the second day of Passover, which is an animal, which is given to animals more, and then we end off with the 2 breads of the mincha, the fine flour, the meal offering, which is fit for a king, fit for human consumption. Bread from fine flour, and it is right. That's not given given to the animals. And the idea is that it is a process. We start off leaving Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. We're freed from slavery, but spiritually, where are we holding? Spiritually, we're like the animals. We don't have a Torah. We don't have that that God chose us and that God gave us a Torah which refines us, which changes us spiritually, right? It elevates us. So through the process of preparing for the giving of the Torah, the 7 weeks till we come to Shavuos, we work on ourselves during this time period and those 7 weeks, just like the original Passover and Shavuos, where the Jewish people prepared themselves to receive the Torah. And finally, they receive the Torah, and that represents the two bread of the flour of that they, right, which is the transformation from leaving more of our base existence and elevating it. Now we have a higher existence. We have an existence close to God. We have an existence we're not just like the animals. It's not just we're not like evolution. We're just sophisticated animals. No, we know right and wrong. We are able to come close to God, and so that's the representation over here from beginning with the Omer, the barley offering, the animalistic offer, the animalistic side of us is represented by the barley offering, which was animal consumption, and then we end up with Shavuos with the human consumption, right? Okay, let's continue here. Okay. Now the Torah in the middle, right? So then we have Passover and Shavuos, and then the Torah in the middle starts talking about, so again, we're in the portion of speaking about the holidays. We spoke about Passover, we spoke about Shavuos and the offerings, and now all of a sudden, randomly, very seemingly, there's nothing random in the Torah, of course, but seems like now the Torah goes on to laws of the poor. Says the Torah, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not remove completely the corner of your field as you reap. This is the mitzvah of Peah, the corner of the field. And you shall not gather the gleanings of your harvest for the poor and the proselyte, you shall leave them. I am Hashem your God. So Rashi says over here, okay, let's see, Rashi here, what is the Torah returned and repeated the commandment that you have to leave aside a corner of your field when reaping, that there's 2 prohibitions if you don't, meaning we have to leave a corner of our field for the poor. And also if we drop 1 or 2 stalks, we have to leave it for the poor. More you could pick up, but a couple you leave. So it's Rashi quotes here, the Tana, the sage from the Mishnah, Amar Avardimos Rabbi Yossi, Avardimos, the son of Rabbi Yossi, said, Ma ra kasav litnam, why did Scripture why did Scripture place these commandments be'emtza haragolim, among the festivals? So we have Pesach ve'atzeres mikan. We started off Passover and Shavuos, and then we're about to see the next verses coming up is Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, the Chag, and Sukkot on the other side. And right, so you have, the Torah says, these are the holidays. It goes right into Shabbos. Okay, we've explained why does it go right into Shabbos, right? Then Passover and Shavuos. Then it speaks about the mitzvah of leaving for the poor, parts of your field for them. And then it goes back to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Very, very interesting. So says Rashi, Lamedcha, he quotes this Chazal from of our Demos, Rabbi Yossi, very, very unique name of our Demos. So says Rashi, Lamedcha, to teach you, whoever gives gleanings, the forgetting, and the corner of the harvested field to the poor person, Karai, he did it properly. Malin alav is considered kilubana beis hamikdash, as if he's built the beis hamikdash v'ikriv karbanos so besocha, and brought his offerings inside of it. Fascinating. And we know that the Rambam, Maimonides, when he speaks about the holidays, Maimonides says, when he speaks about rejoicing on the holidays, he says, don't forget about the poor. He says, Maimonides says, if a person is rejoicing and having a good time, but he didn't give any to the poor who are less fortunate than him, God is not happy with you. You're having a good time but you're not helping your other. You're oh wow, look, I'm such a tzaddik. I'm rejoicing on the festival, but you're not helping another person, people that need help. That's a terrible thing. And we know that on Passover there's a mitzvah of ma'aschitim, right? The wheat, there's a mitzvah to give to the poor so they have what to eat on Passover. It's an obligation, an ancient obligation. And we begin the laws of Passover with that law. So it's this idea as well. So you could say here as well, similarly, that the Torah is saying you're going to rejoice on the holidays. Don't forget about the poor. Don't forget about the poor. So that's one of the ideas. Rashi, of course, over here says that giving to the poor is as if you built a temple and brought the offerings, which we're talking about the offerings on the holidays. That's the connection. Rabbi Schwab, I remember he in this week's portion, he explained something very fascinating. He says that the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, was built, if we trace it back to how the temple was built, we know it was built by King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech. And who started the process? King David, David HaMelech. King David bought the property on the Temple Mount on the behest of the entire Jewish nation. And he started gathering the funds, and he was prevented from building the temple, David, but he wrote the Mizmor, the Psalm for the inauguration of the temple, which we say every day, the beginning of the Psalms of the Psuki de Zimra, the inauguration of the temple, right? And we know that David did everything in his power to build the temple, and his son finished the job and actually built it. Now, if we trace King David's lineage back, where did King David come from? We know in a few weeks, on Shavuos, we read Megillas Rus, the story of the Megillah of Ruth. King David is a great-great-grandson of Ruth. Came from Ruth. And what's the story of Ruth? How did Ruth convert and be part of the Jewish people? Right? So we know that from Boaz, right? Boaz, King David comes from Boaz and Ruth. And we know that Naomi, she loses everything. And, right, Abimelech, her husband, leaves during a famine, and he dies, and his sons die, and Ruth and Orpah are the wives of the sons of that come back with Naomi. And we know the story in the Megillah Ruth that basically Boaz notices Ruth and Naomi, and we know the whole story that eventually he is the closest to redeem, and he marries Ruth, and then King David is born from that marriage. Now, if you look at the story,
also the one who was Ruth was also the one who was gleaning the fields, right?
Exactly. So says Rabbi Shimon Schwab,
that falls right in.
Exactly. Says Rabbi Schwab, what is the Torah coming to say over here? The Torah is coming to say, how did we get the temple and to bring the offerings? Of course, it's all part of God's master plan, and right, that it's in the Torah. But how did God bring it about? God brought it about through Ruth. And the story of Ruth was that she went to the fields to glean, and she was a tsanua. She was very modest about it. She didn't steal, and she took only what she was allotted to. And Boaz took notice of her, that she was a righteous person. She did it in a modest way, how she bent down to take it. She didn't bend down in an immodest way. She was very modest. And how she did it, and she didn't leave her mother-in-law. She was from a princess, and she could have gone back to her idols and back to her nation. She was from Moab. She was a Moabite princess, and she did not. And that whole story. So King David came about and built the temple. So says Rabbi Schwab, ultimately, King David came about, and the whole building of the temple was in the merit of Ruth and the merit of these giving to the poor, the parts that we're supposed to leave for it. So we have to remember every time we do a mitzvah, every time we help someone else, we help our fellow Jew, every time we give charity, we have no idea what we're setting in motion. That merit could be for us, and who knows, that merit could be a tremendous for us. It could be a safeguard for us. It's a fascinating story in I believe it's in Tana Devei Eliyahu, it's actually in the Pele Yoetz. It says a story of a sage from the Talmud of Yeshua ben Levi, who was once given the opportunity to accompany Eliyahu Navi. Eliyahu Navi, we know that Elijah the prophet never died, and at times he reveals himself. He comes in a physical body to very righteous people in this world. Unbelievable, Elijah. So there's a story that he was with this great sage, and they visited the home of a poor man who warmly welcomed them and offered them hospitality with great honor and respect. That night, Elijah went ahead and caused the peasant's cow, upon which he had relied on for his livelihood, to die. Rabbi Yeshua, the sage who was accompanying Elijah, could not understand why Eliyahu would do something so cruel to a poor man who so graciously hosted him. Right? The poor man didn't know it was Eliyahu Navi. They were going on the way, and they stopped by their house, and the poor man said, "Come, I'll take care of you." And then Eliyahu caused the cow to die. Says Eliyahu Navi, Elijah explained to this sage, Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi, that God decreed that this man's wife should die. That was a decree for Rosh Hashanah. But in the merit of the man's generosity and the great respect he showed his guests, his cow was killed instead. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a way of a man. It was the way of a man's beloved wife to be saved. So, meaning we have no idea. Tzedakah, charity, sometimes there's a decree on a person, and by giving charity or by helping others, God sent our way a way that we have a much of a lesser thing in our life, not as severe. So we see charity is very great, and says Rabbi Schwab, in the merit of keeping the mitzvos of one's field, leket shicha and peah, leaving off a corner, or the bundles, or things, the stalks that drop, one or two, leaving it for the poor person, not taking it, right? Which only you or God knows whether you're doing it or not. No one's following you in the field, but Hashem knows, God knows. So a person who does that and he's careful, that's a tremendous merit for a person. So that's why it's put here smack dab in the middle, that we shouldn't get carried away. We're going to just keep the holidays and we're going to rejoice in them, but we're not going to remember the poor people, that the needy. There's no such thing, says Maimonides. You have to remember them as well. So that's the idea. That's the connection over here as well. Okay, let's hold it over here. It's in the fifth aliyah, and the rest of the portion is very fascinating. You have the rest of the holidays. You also have the Torah speaking about the menorah and the showbread in the end of the portion, the showbread that was left for every Shabbos. And then we have seemingly a tragedy in the end of this week's portion, where you have the Mekalel, the one who curses, uses the ineffable name of God to curse. And there was this idea that he was, Rashi says, it was right next to the portion of the showbread, because he said, how could it be? He was extreme. He was very extreme about it. How could it be that God, you're gonna have the showbread in the temple all week? It's going to be sitting there. That's a disgrace. And he didn't realize that the temple and the tabernacle is a miraculous place. Don't worry about it. If God said to do something and to leave the bread, they used to leave it from Shabbos afternoon to Shabbos afternoon is when they would switch it all week. Especially in the olden days, they didn't have preservatives in the bread. Nowadays, you pick up a loaf of bread and there's like 100 different ingredients in it to preserve it, right? But in those days, you can imagine that bread wasn't so, didn't last so long, but it was miraculous. But he was extreme about it. And he ended up cursing and used God's name to curse. and that's in the end. That was a tragedy, and then the fixed portion I have as well. Okay, so we have to see. All right, have a